Hello. This is
Hello.
Robin and Jessica here on another episode of In the Flow. And today we are going to chat about something that I don't know, I shouldn't say it's my favorite topic because, who wants to talk about this? But it seems to be a theme that comes up in my life and in, all of our lives and the lives of our clients. And that is abandonment slash rejection, we'll call it, because the two seem to be very closely tied together. Um, so yeah, I think we're just gonna hop right into it. How are you feeling today, Jessica?
Yeah, I'm excited. It's abandonment and rejection are never fun, but when you're like, hey, should we talk about this or can we? I'm like, yeah, let's dive into that shadow. I find
Yeah.
like when we are willing to go to those most painful places, especially when they've presented themselves, like just kind of diving into it allows me to move through whatever I'm feeling, like, and not just be like so caught up in the feeling, but actually to like move through it. So I love having great dialogue around things that are very challenging for me, especially when I feel safe with somebody I can be vulnerable with, because that allows me to like move around it, to actually feel through it. And there's been many times, I know we mentioned this last time, but there's been many times where when I'm having a conversation with somebody that I feel safe being vulnerable, like I will actually hear myself say things and it's like, boom, like there
Mm-hmm.
it is. Like that's the little nugget we've been talking for 30 minutes to get to this point, and all of a sudden it's like, oh, there it is.
Yeah.
That's my piece that I can now take from this conversation. I can take it on my own and start digesting that because I never made that connection. But working with somebody either in a therapeutic way or in a friendship way, or just having dialogues with different people. Like I'm that type of person that'll sit and like, hey, you want to have a cup of coffee? And we're talking about deep shit. So
Mm-hmm.
even that, like having conversations about how it feels to be vulnerable, how it feels to like abandonment and rejection feel, like how does that impact us? I get excited about it because not many people want to go there, but the ones that
Mm-hmm.
do like are really working in a transformational area, and that speaks to me.
Yeah. It's funny that because it's just popped in as you were sharing it, something I've realized. It's also interesting how when you are being triggered or like you're feeling rejected or abandoned, it's hard to show up and be that safe space for somebody else, right? So
Yeah.
it's in the moment, like I feel like having the awareness and like having the ability to kind of process and like see where you are and like go back and revisit conversations with people can be so healing because we all are, we're all doing the best that we can and we're always getting triggered and we're always having things come up, like even if we don't realize it in the moment, having those aha moments and like you said being able to share and like have that space where you can be really vulnerable. I feel like there's so much healing there and there's so much wisdom that we can gain just by expressing how we're feeling and like our experience. So um yeah, it's funny because I started to think about how there can be such shame and embarrassment around abandonment and rejection, like even talking about it. I feel like I'm a fairly open person, but I found myself like holding back sharing some things with somebody that I feel, fairly safe with. Um, but in that moment, I just felt like so raw and so vulnerable from it that I was like, I probably shouldn't share this right now. Like I'm just feeling some kind of way about it. So maybe I still needed to like process some emotions around it. But it's an interesting dynamic for sure. I think the other thing that continues to come up is in the spiritual community, we hear so much that rejection is protection, from the universe. And I think it's hard. It can be hard to hear that and to like let that settle in. So I like to look at it as more of like a redirection or something not being in alignment, right? Like if we feel like we've been rejected, if we've been fired, or if somebody, that we're in a relationship doesn't want to be with us or whatever it is, and we're feeling that rejection or that abandonment, it's like, oh, okay, if it's not in alignment for them, it also means it's not in alignment for me. So our ego takes that as rejection or abandonment, but really it's just things come to a point where they're not in resonance anymore. And that is the universe's way of like guiding us on towards something else. But the emotions that come up are real, like the triggers and the wounds and, you know, our inner child feeling like, oh my God, I'm not good enough. You know, I'm not, you know, it usually it kind of boils down to that, right? Like, what did I do? I'm not good enough. If I had done something different or if I would have been different, you know, maybe I could have kept this job or this relationship. Um, yeah, what do you have to say about all of this jazz? Because I think, I mean, as Jessica and I tend to do, we're just kind of flowing with the conversation. So
Yeah, well, and you bring up a great point, and it's something that we've talked about earlier, was this whole idea like we may feel that that door shutting is totally in alignment with our soul's purpose and what we're doing here and our mission. And it also does not mean that we don't also feel some type of way about it. And so for me, kind of that cognitive dissonance of, I know this is for my highest good, and it also feels horrible. And then I kind of go into a little spiral around that, like, well, if it's good, then why do I feel this way? And da da da. And like, just get it together, Jessica. Like, and so then we start getting into that self-talk. And it really goes to some of the things you said earlier, where when we are experiencing huge amounts of change, which is what we're experiencing right now, like the entire collective and us personally are experiencing right now, we have to take care of ourselves. So for me, I've got a lot of different people that I have working on my body, whether it's through acupuncture or it's through massage. And I know, like, okay, when I go get a pedicure, it's going to be a nice, relaxing time. But there's one person that I work with that does massage on me. And I know every time I go see her, it's going to be a transformative experience. Like, we're not just playing around. Like, there's going to be ancestral, physical, visceral, fascia, everything's going to be moving, going on. And so now, like, the first time I went to her, it kind of surprised me. That's not what I was expecting. I'm like, okay, I'm getting a massage. Like, that's not what happened. She's amazing. So from now on, like, I was like, okay, I love that because I want this in my life. Like, I'm calling these things into my life. So now when I see her, I don't do anything the rest of that night. Like, I'm staying at home, I'm hermiting, I'm taking care of myself really deeply. And so that's the other piece. Like, when we start wanting to manifest things in our life, like, I want this, all of a sudden stuff starts showing up and we're like, whoa, I wasn't ready for it to come in that way. But having that, like, okay, this is something I asked for, and it's also rocking my world and the very foundations of it. So how can I take care of myself? And then also being surrounded by people that are really flexible. So like you and I, you know, there are times where like we're like, hey, we have this planned, and it's like, well, I'm not available. And that comes from both sides. So having that space of, I also know that the people that I'm surrounding by have enough grace in our relationship that I can say, I went and had a massage today and it was really intense, and I don't really think I'm available to do anything else but take care of myself. So it really comes into, especially when we're feeling abandoned, when we're feeling rejection, sometimes we don't even want to sit with ourselves in that. It can be so overwhelming, and the emotions and everything that comes up, we just kind of want to escape. So, in what ways can we take care of ourselves and be with ourselves while we're going through this? And what do we need to do? Like, I ask myself, what do I need to do to feel comfortable in this moment? Like, part of me may want to feel like running away. Like, okay, so there's a physical desire to move. Let me go on a walk. So literally just kind of being able to sit with yourself and move, we don't want to mentalize things, but if you can just step out of it for a minute and say, I'm having a hard time. What can I do to take care of myself? Like, what I feel like I want to run away. Well, let me go run. You know what I mean? Like, when we're processing these difficult things, maybe there is some physical activity we can do to help with that fight or flight in our body. Looking at our nervous system and kind of navigating, like, how can I feel more grounded in this moment so that I can return to my own safety? So that's where it's like, yes, how do we navigate really difficult, strong, hard emotions that hit all the way to core childhood things? Well, let's work on finding ways to take care of ourselves, to tap into our own self-awareness, and really provide a deep level of nurturing that we may not have ever experienced. So, it may be like, I don't even know what this looks like because nobody's ever been showed up for me in this way. So let me Google it. Like, I remember doing that. Like, what do people do when they're happy? I remember, like, early in my 20s, like, I was really struggling, and it was like, oh, they like to go outside and pick flowers or have coffee with a friend. And so it's like, it's okay. It doesn't mean there's anything wrong with you when you have no clue what happiness looks like in this moment, what you want to do. Um, but then seek that out. Like ask people, what does happiness look like for you? Like, what do you do when you're excited? Like, and that's where there was a whole period of time, I'm starting to do it more now, but a whole period of time in my 20s where I would just ask people like these random questions and they loved it. They loved the interactions with me because it was like, hey, let's explore like what this looks like. But also helps me understand like, okay, that's what they do. So like, let me try some different things on and see how it feels and what works for me. And now I'm more aware of this. And so it's not so scary to go into the shadow and into these scary things because I know how to help myself and take care of myself.
I love that. Like there's so much goodness in what you just shared. So first of all, I want to go back to what you were saying about right, like sometimes putting a boundary in place, somebody else can take that as rejection, right? Like we were chatting about that, where friends, it's like, oh, if I don't, and I've certainly been on both sides of this, like somebody not responding to me in a timely manner, or them not being available when I needed them. That can feel rejecting, but it's like if that wound is wanting to come up and be felt and it's wanting to be healed, we're going to have those kind of outward situations or mirrors that are there for us to kind of trigger that emotion. The last week, really, um, what you were saying about like how deeply it hurts. I mean, I couldn't that rejection wound when it came up or abandonment in my case like recently it was rejection but to me it is kind of tied in with that abandonment and the self-worth. I couldn't get over like how deeply it hurt in my body. I was like holy crap like it was really painful to like feel the feelings and all the things that went around with it. So it really was this call for me to like sit with my inner child and like just talk to her. Like I'm realizing how important that is for me. Yes. Like how you would want your parents to talk to you, or if you have children, like how you would talk to them, like very lovingly. And, I see you, I understand what you're feeling, everything's going to be okay. Like that's a big one for me. And I feel like with clients as well, like I think we all just want to know that things are going to be okay. Even though we're going through this challenging period or we're feeling all this pain, it's like it's going to be okay, Um, because in that moment it can feel really disheartening and really Ali agrees. Can feel really, really shattering. I in that moment I was just like, wow, like this feels like, it's going to destroy me. And like logically, I knew that it wasn't going to. I'm like, I'll get over this, like I do everything else in my life. But in that moment, and it was weird because it was one of those situations where I was like, I was happy when the rejection came. I was like surprised. I was excited. I was sad. It was such a weird moment where I was like, oh my God, like all of these really intense emotions, like coming up in that moment were just like, oh, okay, like this is a lot right now. um, and then continuing to sit with that, like, what's coming up for me and like sorry, I'm trying to like get out of the light, but um, what and I'm antsy pantsy, so there's both of those. um yeah, it's so interesting when we have those opportunities to reparent ourselves. I feel like so much of when you're doing the really deep work, it does kind of go back to your inner child and it goes back to reparenting yourself or whatever you want to call it. I mean, maybe there's some other terms for it other than inner child work. That just seems to be what um, the modality or like the technique that I've resonated with and that I tend to go back to. So I'm curious, do you guys, does it show up for you differently? Like, are there other, is there something else that you would kind of consider that falling under rather than inner child? Is that, I mean, you and I talk a fair
Yeah.
bit about inner child. I feel like, most people that I chat with, it tends to go back to the inner child stuff.
Well, and you can call it parts work, there's
Yeah.
IFS, but it's all coming back to these wounds that we had in our childhood and we didn't have the capacity to work on it then. And that's where it goes to like what you said, this rejection happened, but it felt like it was the end of the world. And part of you was like, it's not that serious, but there is a part of you that it was that serious. So just like discussing your whole process is beautiful because you're like, this is coming up, all of these emotions are coming up, and what you chose to do was to sit with it. And that's really what we have to do is create a life. And, that's what I've been really working on. I've done spiritual work and shadow work and all these things. And right now, I've been working on creating a life where there's enough space so that if something like this comes up, I can sit with myself and I can work through it. And however long it takes, I'm going to work with it and reparent. And that's exactly it. We are reparenting our inner child. We are providing that part of us with the resources that we now have as an adult that we didn't have, that maybe even our parents didn't have because maybe they didn't have the time to do all the work or whatever, but we have more resources now than we did then. So how can we work with ourselves? I think you also mentioned this idea like this stuff, you've been working on this stuff over and over and over. And it's like, yeah, each time we get to reparent ourselves a little bit better and kind of turn off some of those trigger buttons. And so is it going to keep coming up? Sure, but it's not going to be as sharp. And the other thing too is our inner child, like what does our inner child have to do to get our attention?
Mm.
And that's where it's like my inner child has my attention every day. Like as I'm going to sleep and I'm laying in the bed, I spend a little time with myself, kind of unpacking whatever density I feel in my body. I've really been working on heart coherence, where I'm literally bringing my awareness into my heart as much as I can remember to do throughout the day. So am I sitting there for 20 minutes and doing? No. But whenever I think about it, like multiple times throughout the day, I'm bringing it in and I'm feeling that connection. And then when I go to bed at night, that's where I sit and kind of unpack what I need to unpack. So my inner child doesn't have to scream at me. It doesn't have to shut down my body. It doesn't have to create huge conflict for me to address the things that are going on. And I also like this is kind of like what I'm doing now. Like this is my life. My relationships are talking about this stuff and being comfortable having friends where I can say like, wow, I really felt this way and being vulnerable. Because I feel like, you had mentioned this idea of setting boundaries, and part of us taking care of ourselves and being available for our inner child and having space is setting boundaries. And that can appear as a rejection to others. So I've realized when I'm able to be vulnerable and I'm able to communicate clearly, I can say, hey, Robin, I need some space because I'm having a hard time dealing with this thing. And I know I can say that to Robin. And, you're like recently I've had a tooth removed. And I said, Robin, I need some space. I'm having a hard time with this tooth. It's healing, but it's taking a lot more out of me than I thought. And you were like, great, not a problem. Sending you some Reiki. I'll check in. Just let me know. And that was such a beautiful thing is that, yes, we have to show up and have some transparency and have some vulnerability. Like, yeah, I don't mind telling people like, this is what's going on with me right now. So I'm not going to be available and just leaving it. Like, I'm not looking for a whole lot of dialogue around it. I'm not looking for sympathy. I'm just informing and I'm moving forward. And I've realized that that helps with a lot of clean boundaries and clean communication. And people don't take things personally. Like when I do stuff, they don't take it personally because they know that I am committed to my own process and it's not personal. If there was a problem in relationship, like I would have that conversation kindly, compassionately, and directly. So I feel like there's a lot we can do when we start showing up for ourselves. We can also show up for our relationships in different ways that are very clean and clear. And that reduces some of this kind of like indirect rejection and feeling comfortable saying that, like, wow, Jessica, that I kind of feel rejection. I feel abandonment a little bit by what's going on. And I've had friends say that, like, Jessica, I haven't heard from you for a couple of weeks. And I'm like, oh yeah, thank you for bringing that up. It had nothing to do with you. And I'm sorry that it brought up those feelings for you, but this is what I was going through.
Yeah, I think because that happens, right? When you're a human being anyway, and especially when you're on your healing journey. And I like maybe we have more awareness around it when we're consciously on our journey, where we can recognize we get to that point where because I used to be really bad about like my moon is in Cancer and I would get emotionally triggered or I would get exhausted or whatever it was. And I would like immediately go into that little shell. and like, I was so bad about being really flaky. Like I would make plans with people and then cancel because I just couldn't, energetically, I just could not be around people. I couldn't be, out during that phase. And then I found like the more that I grew and the more that I healed, it was like, okay, I'm more aware of those times when I need that space. And then also I'm much better at saying, actually, like, I don't want to go out tonight. I need to like stay at home and, have some quiet time or, whatever that looks like. I guess I just need to accept that the sun is all up in my stuff because I've
Or
tried.
light is
I need
being
to,
shed on you.
yeah, I need to remember for next time that I love my house so much, y'all, but it's like there's so much natural light that it's ironic that it ends up, being like really dark or really light. Anyway, um, so yeah, it's a process for sure. And I think continuing to cultivate those relationships that you can be really vulnerable and you can say, hey, I just need some quiet time right now. I think I even reached out to you over the weekend because I could just kind of feel energetically. And I was like, hey, is it like, do you need anything? Do you need any support? And you were like, nope. And I was like, oh, okay. Like, I'm not going to take it personally. I'm not going to. Um, I think the other thing that's interesting to me is how in our relationships, right? Like, there's some people in our lives that we can have that interaction with. And we're like, fine, no problem. We don't take it personally. And then other people in our lives, it's like, oh my God, are they mad at me? Like, did I say something? It's just like this whole dialogue that starts. So I think also, being able to work with your inner child and say, like, oh, bringing that curiosity to it. Like, what is it about my relationship with this person or in this situation that I'm super triggered if they don't respond back to me or if it takes them, it's so interesting with like telephones now and, like the I mean, I think typical response time back in the day was like, 3 days, like you were okay, right? Like, oh, I couldn't talk to so and so for like 3 days. It's like if you send somebody a text and they haven't responded in 4 hours, you're like, oh my God, it's the end of the world. It's like, back when we had landlines and had to like leave voicemails for people, or messages, whatever, on the old school answering machine. It's like you may not be able to connect with somebody for a few days and we just dealt with it, but it's so cute to like see um how up in arms we can get about people's response times or the stories that we tell ourselves about why they're not responding to us or yeah, it's very interesting to notice when that rejection comes up and when that abandonment comes up because really, I mean, we're never truly abandoned. The other thing that I've been healing a lot around, and I realized it's such a collective wound. I think when you sign up in the ethers, to be a whatever you want to call it, like somebody who is on a healing journey at the level that a lot of us are, we are healing collective wounds. We're healing not only for our own family lineage and for ourselves, but we're healing it for the collective. And I think loneliness is another one that's like wrapped up in the abandonment and the rejection because we're afraid of not being loved. We're afraid of, feeling that loneliness and that like, oh my God, like nobody's ever going to love me. I'm not going to be supported. I'm not going to be seen. I'm not going to be appreciated. Um, so the loneliness has been coming up. So that's some of the ways I just am feeling called to share this. So like some of the ways that I've been moving through that is to continually connect with the energy that's around us all the time, right? Like we are love, we're constantly surrounded by love. Even if you're not physically sitting with somebody, like that person still loves you and cares about you. Like you can tune in with that energetically and feel it. If we tune into, and I'm still learning about this, so let me just feel into it for a moment. So there is a energetic field that like we can consciously tap into. So right, just through our intention, just through our awareness and kind of playing around with it. So it came up for me in an energy session that I had a couple weeks ago. So I was tuning into the field and like, okay, I want to feel love right now. So I waited until I felt that love in my body. And then I just really opened myself up to it. And I was like, okay, I want to feel abundance. And I opened myself up until I really felt that in my body. and like all of these different things that I desire for myself. I just called it out into the universe and then just waited to like, and I'm getting, yeah, little body confirmations. I just waited to feel that, right? I want to feel seen. Okay, so I waited until I felt that. I wasn't needing it from a specific person. I was getting that from the universe, from the field, whatever you want to call it. Like you, again, you can play around with it. So working with like different goddesses or ancestors, or there's so much energy that we can't see that loves us and supports us, right? Probably even your worst enemy on an energetic level, there's love between you and that person energetically, right? Like we are all love. We're all connected. We're all helping each other. We're all supporting each other on that higher spiritual level to heal and to grow, which is why we do have challenges with people a lot of times. Um, so it's like continuing to open yourself up to that higher spiritual perspective rather than getting stuck like in ego land of, well, this person did this to me and they're not noticing me or they're not loving me the way that I want them to. Well, it's like, okay, maybe they can't right now, maybe they're going through their own shit. Maybe they don't even know that you're feeling this way. But like, how can you continue to open yourself up to that bigger energy of field or that bigger field of energy, um, and allow yourself to feel loved and appreciated that way? And not to say that, right? Like, if you have relationships or if you have jobs or situations in your life that you don't feel seen and valued, I'm not saying that you shouldn't evaluate those and either talk to the person about it or um, maybe leave that situation. But so much of what we're actually experiencing is because we're projecting that out into the world, right? If we have this really deep core belief that I'm not good enough, I'm not lovable, nobody sees me, nobody appreciates me, that's what we're broadcasting out into the world. So it's like you can't see anything but that. That's what everybody in your, not everybody, but right, like a lot of times that's what people are going to kind of send back to you is that dynamic where you end up feeling unseen or unloved or unworthy. So tuning into that field, I think, can be like for me, it's definitely rewiring that part of me that doesn't feel lovable or that doesn't feel worthy. Because I believe that we all have, you know, for some of us it might be a bigger wound. So for some of us it could be something else. But continuing to kind of tune into that energy that is surrounding all of us for me, it's been a really beautiful practice.
Well, and for me, I'm completely in line with you on that. Allowing the universe to meet you and tapping into that energy for me, like I literally had a bird come to my window while I was in this work meeting that was so challenging. And it literally sat there and sang for 5 minutes. It was looking right at me, singing at me. And it was just so beautiful. And I just got distracted from what was going on, which was definitely what needed to happen. And like that was like the universe gave me a little gift. Like, I know this is challenging, and everybody in the Zoom room is having a challenge, and you get to have a bird serenade you while this is all happening. And it's like, wow. Like, so for me, building that relationship with nature, with the universe, has helped me feel less alone because like there's no human being that could have been that perfect, like just shown up and said the right things. Like this bird just showed up and said the right thing. And it was totally non-obtrusive. Like I could just still sit there. They see me looking. I just happen to be looking at this beautiful bird and listening to it. So having the universe like meet your needs in this beautiful synchronistic way, I can say for me, that's what's made things a lot easier. Like there was a time, I think, I don't know if it was last year or the year before, where I felt like, oh my God, I feel like this is a huge crossroads for my career. And in my mind, that was, I'm going to meet with some like high performance players, and they're going to help me on my career path. And literally it was the end. Like it was the end of that. Like, nope, you're not going anywhere with this. Like that's a dead end. But I also got to really see like that's a dead end and you need to reevaluate. So I was able to like shift in some, because I knew it was a powerful moment. I had this lunar moth land on my office window for 3 days, and then it finally flew away. And I was like, oh, this is really powerful. I know this is going to be something transformational. And what that was, your day job is here to fulfill a need, but you're really, it's not going to be a place of growth. It's going to be a place of stability. And that's going to provide a place that I can move from. So it was completely aligned with my soul, completely devastating to my ego that was like, I'm just going to climb the ladder and be this something or another, have an alphabet behind my name and a fancy chief or director of something. Not at all. But like the clarity for me has allowed me to shift and move. So I've always also said to the universe, don't ever let me go down a path that is not going to work out. Like slam that door in my face and I will deal with my feelings. So that's where for me, it's like, okay, wow, the door got slammed. I'm going to take a minute and recalibrate because I don't even know where I'm going, but I know it's not there. And then I can deal with that loss, that rejection, that aloneness, and then oftentimes when I kind of settle back into it, it's like, well, it was everybody else's expectations that really was pushing and pressuring me to move in this direction. And really, what do I want? And it allowed me to kind of decondition, what my worth was, because my worth has always been tied to my work ever since I was a child. It's like you work, and that means that you are worth something. So it's allowed me to uncouple that a lot too, and look at a lot of those core and limiting beliefs that I've had. So it's really like, okay, it's like when you fall out of a tree and you get the wind knocked out of you. There's this moment of like, ooh, let me sit here in all of this and catch my breath. So let me deal with the waves of emotions that are coming crashing all over in every single way. And when I actually take the time to do that and, take a bath, sit with a fire, light a candle, go get myself a cup of coffee, eat some really yummy soup, like let me pretend like I'm sick and nurture myself in this moment and get the nice comfy socks and the comfy robe on and bundle my hair up and just kind of sit there and sip on something, some hot tea or soup. And, let me just be in this place for a couple of days where I need to be taken care of. And when I emerge from that, my inner child's like, you're so there for me. And I'm like, yeah, I'm so there for you. Like, let's just like not do anything. And then this clarity lands. So like, because I've created a process around dealing with disappointment, because disappointment is a part of our everyday life, I feel like I'm able to move through it with much more grace. And also like, it's, I didn't fail. I didn't fail. So I've really also worked on my own self-judgment, my own languaging. And now, as we have talked, like it's not like it's easier. It's like, oh, Jessica's got it all figured out. No, now this stuff is so subtle that I don't even realize it's going on in the background. So it's literally like before it'd be like, okay, Jessica, I already know what I'm dealing with. And now it's like, oh, I had to have a 20-minute conversation to get to that really subtle belief that's been holding me back. So, everybody's working on it. It may be really like right there and you can just grab it, or it may be so subtle that it takes you a while to sit with it and ponder over it for days, weeks, months before you can grab a hold of it. And that's one of the things in our conversation today. Like, my work has been challenging for like 12 years. Like, off and on, it's been really challenging. And in our conversation today, I realized, oh, I am playing out some major themes from my childhood. And I was just like, oh, I'm just gonna have to sit here for a minute and sit with this because if I never understood it in that way. It's like, oh, I'm waiting every day for retirement. And as a child, I was waiting every day for college. So how can I shift this narrative in my day-to-day life now? Because I didn't have the skills then, but I definitely have the ability to move through this now. And that was so empowering. It's like, oh, thank God I can give up this struggle because I don't want it anymore. And oftentimes when we wear ourselves out and when we're like, I at some points I'm like, I want to be rejected by this so I can just move on. And it's like, nope. When I wear my own self out, then I can be available. Like I'm like so exhausted that all I can do is sit still and allow everything to come in, the awareness to settle on me.
I definitely have those moments where I'm like, could the universe like reject me or, could this situation reject me so I can just not have to keep dealing with it? Yeah. The other thing I want to share about is like the failure. So Jessica and I have chatted a fair amount about this because in human design, I'm a 3-5, which I didn't study human design, so I don't know a ton about it, but I do know that it is a lot around like trial and error and almost like failing, trying different things and like having the experience. But for me, that has been such a huge thing that I've had to shift in my life. Like I had the whole perfectionism thing. So it's an interesting dynamic, right? To go from feeling like which there's no perfect, but right, like I definitely was in that whole shadow for quite a number of years, into, well, what does failure actually teach us? And it's funny because I have a book. It's like Doreen Virtue's like 365 um like daily affirmations or message book or whatever from the angels. And the one that I got the other day was acknowledge that you do everything right. And I was like, oh, so instead of beating myself up all the time, like, oh my God, did you make the right decision? Like, I don't want to mess up, because I still, I'm still working on it. Like, oh, okay, what if I just had that perspective that like every choice that I made, every decision that I made, what if I just acknowledged that that was right? What if I acknowledged that this rejection or this abandonment, what if this is right? What if this is what's meant to be happening? And um, I think there's such power in that, like just having that ability to have that faith. And I'll share with y'all, like, I think it's a process to get there. I'm still getting there. Um, but I think the more that you can just um, ask for that faith and ask for that trust, like anytime that we ask the universe for things, it's going to bring forward that quality, or it's going to bring forward that thing that we want to work on. So, um, it's like praying for patience, like be careful what you ask for, because you're going to get lots of situations that try your patience. So it's kind of the same with trust, right? Like I had this huge realization. I was in a plant ceremony about a month ago, and trust was like one of my biggest intentions for the ceremony. And I was like, oh, the universe is like gonna imbue me with this like spirit of trust, and I'm gonna be like, I'm gonna be filled with so much faith and trust. And what I heard, like very, kind of with his dry humor, which plant medicine tends to have with me, was like, it's a choice. Like it's a choice that you make again and again and again and again. And it's not easy, and it's not something that you have like this guaranteed outcome. Like you continue to choose to trust, right? Because what's the alternative? Like, I could have gone into, oh my God, I'm so unloved, like nobody wants me, nobody loves me. Um, but leaning into like, okay, I trust that this situation is being taken away from me. I trust that something better is coming. Um, yeah, so I feel like I'm kind of at a wrapping up point. Jessica, do you have anything else you want to share? Anything else coming through for you?
Yeah, I just wanted to hop in on that. The trust is about acceptance. Like, and
Mm,
when we can accept what's coming at us, we're literally like grabbing it and embracing it and drawing it towards us. So it's like, how do you change? By drawing experience to you. If you keep pushing it away, then it's just going to keep coming, and probably louder and probably more impact. So it's like, how can I grab a hold of that? Like, as it's coming towards me, how can I grab a hold of it? And I know, I want to say Elijah Parker from the Gene Keys is the one who talks about this, like this emotional jujitsu. Like, like, I accept you and I'm gonna like do this dance with you until we both figure it out. And when we can like grab a hold and accept whatever experience is coming towards us and move in that energy, then we're not fighting it. Like the amount of energy to consistently push something away, it's exhausting, and it causes us to be dug in. So we're not transforming and we're not moving. And of course, that radical acceptance of whatever's coming up, like that's like a whole perspective shift. So it does create a little wobble with us. But if we can trust and accept, then we can move through it. And so, when we're pushing something away, we're like standing, we're it's we're stuck. So, and that's for me, it's like, where are my blockages? Where are my areas of resistance? And how can I soften it? And how can I move with it? And how can I accept what's coming at me? And, in that moment where that beautiful bird, I said, universe, if I'm supposed to be here working in this job, doing this thing, I need you to help me. Like, I need you to help me. Because everybody's like, oh, Jessica, you have such powerful words and such powerful vision. And sometimes I'm like, no, I do not. So it's like, if I'm supposed to step into this more, I need you to help me. And so having that bird fly up and tweet, 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 like I was totally like, it's literally like I was taken out of time and space in this middle of this very charged meeting where, and I was even like chuckling a little bit and like, it was pretty tense. And like, so it literally just changed the whole atmosphere around this meeting. And I was able to show up really clear because I took a little mind break, a little universe, synchronicity break from the whole thing. And, bringing in humor, I can say there's been a long time where I was humorless and just bringing in lightness and wanting humor and even saying, universe, bring in more humor. I have coworkers that are like that's like what they want too. So we have this chat, like, can we just like chuckle about it and not get offended and just kind of move through it? And so knowing like I've got my humor buddy where it's like, okay, I just need to talk about it and I'm probably going to vent a little bit and then like tell me how it can be funny and like, and so it's like, yes, the universe is conspiring to help me accept what's coming at me. And when I'm not feeling attacked, I can be so much more open to receiving whatever's coming. Like I may not like it, but it's like, okay, how can I work with this thing? And breaking down those walls of resistance. It's like, okay, well, that wasn't so bad. And it's like, I don't really have a choice. I'm gonna have to accept it anyway. So like let's like, okay, well, we've got our, people that get their farm share, and it's like all this kale. Like, I didn't want kale. I don't like kale, but let me figure out how to make some soup out of this thing. So, like, that's where it's like, what is the farm basket of life bringing you? And what amazing, delicious nutritiousness can you bring out of that? And maybe we don't know. Maybe we have to phone a friend. Maybe we have to ask Google. Maybe we have to do all of these things just to figure out what to do with all this kale. But that's like a metaphor for our lives. Like, I don't know how to deal with this, shit show that's happening. So let me just start polling the audience. Like, help me. What do you think? What would you do? How would you do this? Like, sometimes even I'll be watching something on Netflix and it's like somebody dealing with a similar situation and it may be a comedy. So they, completely made a joke out of it or, they were super serious and irate and then they like fell off the side of the house. Like, whatever's happening, but it's like it allows me to see it from a different perspective and that allows me to move through it. So acceptance and trust doesn't have to be this harsh thing where it's just like, okay, I'm gonna have to deny myself. And no, like I'm gonna love my inner child through this whole thing. And I'm gonna ask the universe to bring in humor and lightness and flow and synchronicity so that I can start engaging in this emotional jujitsu where I'm just accepting everything that comes my way and like moving to transform it and just allowing myself to be present for all of that. So it's a beautiful opportunity, a beautiful dance if we can get enough support, taking care of ourselves, the universe, our friends, our community, rest, like whatever we need, and just engaging more of that. Like the answer is always like, if things are getting crazy, like then get more self-care and get more assistance and sometimes even get more alone time. Like just okay, like I just need more help with this. And there's nothing wrong with that. So yeah, I think it's, and these are important conversations. I know we've had a couple heavy, like we're talking about failure and we're talking about rejection and we're talking about some of this stuff, but this is where we're at right now. Like, so let's use this time to build these skills and get really strong and good at it because it's going to be here. So let's figure it out. Let's be kale cooking masters. And that's it. I'm done with the farm share.
I love the analogy. Like it's such a, I love when you have those moments like in life where it seems like such a tiny situation, but it so strongly mirrors like what's very deeply happening in your psyche or in your emotional experience. It's like, oh my God, this is like exactly what's happening in my life. For a lot of times for me, it comes up with dance, um, and how like my body shows up in dance and right, like instructors that I have that they don't, I shouldn't say they don't know anything, but right, they're not like talking to me about spiritual stuff, but they'll say something and I'm like, holy crap. It's like they're tuning into like my subconscious and identifying like what it is I'm working on right now. It's very interesting the way that, life kind of shows you these different things. So thank you, Jessica, for sharing that. I think that's like such a strong point to end on. Yeah, so thank you all for joining us again. We appreciate you and we see you. We think that you're awesome. keep up the good work. Remind yourself that everything that you're doing is right, and give your inner child some extra love, maybe some playtime or some rest, whatever it is that you need as we continue to shift through, this energy that's happening right now. So thank you all for joining us.
Thank you, and talk to you later.
Bye.
I can see the stars align, dance around the moon every night. And now my eyes are open wide, and the sky has never looked so bright. And I don't need to see the road to believe